Hey, what is going on guys? RvzStealth here, and in today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the top lane tier list for patch 8.1. So this is going to be the first tier list here for the new season, and this should give you a pretty good idea of what you should be looking to prioritize up in the top lane when the new rank season does hit live. So to start it off in the tier 1 for this patch is going to be Illaoi. So Illaoi is a pick that has definitely rose in popularity over the past few patches. There's a few different reasons as to why Illaoi is actually now one of the strongest blind pick top laners, at least for solo queue. So the first reason as to why Illaoi has gotten stronger recently is because Kleptomancy is just really strong on her. It's super easy to proc in the laning phase. You can proc it with your W, and your W is on like a 4-second cooldown. So if you're in a melee matchup, if you're up against a tank who really can't do too much against you in the laning phase, then every 4 seconds you're getting a Klepto proc, and it just allows you to generate a ton of gold and a ton of resources in the laning phase. Illaoi also has very few counters in the top lane. There's not too many picks, like especially melee champions, that can actually do too much against her in the laning phase. A few range picks can do alright against her, like Teemo is supposedly a pretty good pick against Illaoi, but honestly, there's not too many matchups that Illaoi can at least go even in. Like there's very few picks that are actually going to beat Illaoi in the laning phase. The base damage buff helps out a lot of champions that are building Trinity Force or that are building Sheen, and I think Illaoi is very underrated with a Trinity Force rush or like with an Iceborne Gauntlet, because the Sheen procs that you get with your W are really good for mid-game team fights. You can like half health a squishy target if you have Trinity Force and you're just constantly using your W on them. So if you are in an easy matchup, like if you're not up against a tank top laner, then I would recommend trying Trinity Force out on Illaoi. And then also she's a great pick for solo queue because she's got that 1v2 potential up in the top lane, so it doesn't really matter if you get ganked with Illaoi. Like at level 6, if you got your ultimate and if you have stopwatch as well, then you just have a ton of outplay potential, and you don't really have to rely on your jungler at all, especially once you're level 6. You can get ganked, and a lot of the times you can still turn a 1v2 situation. So next up in the tier 1 here is going to be Gangplank, and Gangplank's gotten a lot stronger in the preseason and now in season 8 for a lot of the same reasons that Illaoi got stronger. So Kleptomancy, really good on Gangplank as well. You can very easily proc it in the laning phase. You can proc it with your Q, and because of that, it allows them to generate a ton of gold in the early game. And with Gangplank, you're gonna be able to get your mid-game power spike and your core items a lot faster, and the faster you can get to those core items on Gangplank, the stronger you're going to be, and that's one of the main reasons as to why he's gotten stronger in season 8. Now also, picks that used to do pretty well against Gangplank, like these bruiser lane bully top laners, they're really not as strong as they were at least in previous seasons, and it does free up the laning phase a little bit more for Gangplank now, so he's not just completely crushed in the laning phase in certain matchups. He can at least hold his own in a lot of these matchups that he used to just absolutely get dumpstered in. And then you've also got that base damage buff in the preseason that really helps out Gangplank. You're going to rush Trinity Force every single game, so it does allow you to do quite a bit more damage with your Sheen procs, and it allows you to do a lot more damage in the mid game, that's for sure. His ultimate cooldown does have the potential to be lower now. A lot of Gangplanks are taking sorcery as their secondary tree, and that does allow you to grab the ultimate hat, grab Transcendence as well. So your ultimate, even though it is on a super long cooldown, if you are taking like ultimate hat and Transcendence, it's really not on that long of a cooldown, or it's at least on a shorter cooldown than it was before. So next up here is going to be, in my opinion, one of the better fighter or bruiser top laners for 8.1, who is Kamil. So Kamil, there's a few different reasons to why she's gotten stronger in season 8. The first one is that she's really good with the Comet Scorch poke in the laning phase. With her W, it guarantees you're gonna apply the Comet, and because of that, it allows you to get a lot of free poke off in the laning phase, and in melee matchups where the enemy can't really trade back against that, she can really look to poke them down and just gain a really good lane advantage. She also did get some buffs a few patches ago, so that really helped her out as well, and that's kind of what tipped her over from like A tier into S tier. Those buffs definitely did help her out quite a bit. And then another thing that is very common with these S tier champions in this patch is that they all benefit, or a lot of them benefit, from the base damage buff in the preseason. A lot of these champions in the tier 1 are Trinity Force users, and Kamil is one as well, so that definitely did help her out as well. And then in my opinion, Kamil is one of the better just carry top laners for solo queue, one of the better fighter bruiser top laners, because she has the ability to actually solo carry a game. She can very easily get onto the back line with her E and her ultimate. She can lock down that fed carry on the enemy team and burst them out very easily. So I think that if you get a lead with Kamil, it's a lot easier to extend that lead, and it's a lot easier to just really end a game quicker due to the fact that she does have a lot more mobility than a lot of the other fighter or bruiser top laners. So pretty much a staple in the tier 1 for the past few patches has been Maokai. Maokai is just your safe, reliable tank top laner that you can pick right now. If you're auto-filled to top lane, if you don't really know how to play top lane, then Maokai is just a very reliant top lane pick. You're always going to be useful on the champion, which is why I think he can succeed quite a bit in solo queue. You don't have to really care about winning lane on the champion. A lot of the times when I go up against Maokai in lane, he can just go even, he can lose lane even, and you're still going to be a lot more useful than other top laners come team fighting, especially because Maokai is one of the best team fighting top laners in the game. As long as you don't get like absolutely dumpstered in the laning phase, which is not hard to do on Maokai, then you are going to be one of the more useful top laners when it does come to mid game team fights. There weren't really any changes specifically in 8.1 that's really going to affect Maokai. There was a nerf to his Q in 7.24, which didn't really affect him too much, and then Sunfire Cape did get buffed in 7.24, so that is a nice buff to Maokai, and it does help him out, but he's going to stay a pretty good top laner for the next few patches in my opinion, as long as he doesn't receive some crazy big nerf. And then lastly, to round out the tier 1 or the S tier champions for this patch is going to be Nasus. So Nasus for solo queue in this patch is actually one of the strongest top laners right now. So Nasus is also really good with Kleptomancy. If you are running Klepto on Nasus, then it's just very easy to proc that in the laning phase with your Q and with your W when you are looking to go for trades. He also does very well right now into these tank matchups. So if you're up against an Ornn or a Maokai, or just really any melee matchup, then it's very easy to proc the Klepto, and he doesn't really have too many matchups right now that are super hard. The same thing kind of goes for Nasus that went for Gangplank. A lot of his counters really aren't that good in Season 8, or they're just not really able to completely punish him in the laning phase and really bully him out, so it does allow Nasus to just stack up in the laning phase, have a much stronger laning phase in Season 8, and then he just becomes a monster come the mid to late game. Yet again, we have another Trinity Force user, and the base damage buffs in 7.22 help out Nasus a lot, and it just allows him to do a lot more damage once he does pick up that item. And then Talisman of Ascension, a lot of people are running this right now on Nasus. It actually does have a very high win rate and a pretty considerable pick rate as well, so I would recommend trying that out if you haven't on your Nasus top lane. A lot of people are starting coin on him, going for an early Nomad's Medallion, and then either going Sheen next or finishing off their Talisman. I think that this build is actually really strong. I've tried it out a few times on him, and it just allows him to stay super mobile. Talisman does give you a pretty good amount of armor, and it's a pretty cheap item as well, and along with the Kleptomancy, you're just going to generate a ton of gold in the early game. So moving on to the tier 2 champions now, these are the A tier champions. They're still pretty strong for this patch. Now, you're going to notice that Jace and Heimerdinger are in tier 2 now instead of tier 1. Both these champions have been nerfed in recent patches. Jace got nerfed indirectly by the lethality changes. He also did end up getting some nerfs himself, so he's not as strong as he was a few patches ago, and he is now in tier 2. As for Heimerdinger, he did end up getting that nerf in this patch to his ultimate, so that does bring him down in power a little bit. I still think that Heimer could be like borderline tier 1. It just does depend on how strong you are on the champion. If you know how to play him well in the laning phase and you can still punish those melee matchups, then I still think he is a very strong pick for this patch. Another pick that you will notice is now tier 2 and not tier 1 is Ornn. So for the competitive scene, you're probably still going to see Ornn pretty highly prioritized, but in my opinion for solo queue, I don't think he's the best carry top lane pick. I think that he's fine if you need a tank on your team, he's fine if you're just lacking a strong front line in the top lane, but I feel like Maokai is just the better tank top laner right now for solo queue. Those nerfs that Ornn got a few patches ago did definitely hurt him quite a bit, and I just don't think that he is the best carry top laner right now. The champions I have in the tier 1, in my opinion, are going to give you the best chance at solo carrying games. There's not really too much else to note here about these tier 2 picks. I guess one other champion I could briefly touch on is Yasuo. So Yasuo did get those buffs in the previous patch or a few patches ago, and they did help him out quite a bit for the top lane. I think that in melee matchups, you can do pretty well with Yasuo right now, especially in those tank matchups like against Maokai. Yasuo can definitely do very well once he does get a few items. He can just really start to outscale the Maokai and beat him in the 1v1. Now, Kleptomancy on Yasuo is actually what's doing best on him right now. So if you are in a melee matchup where you think you're going to have a pretty easy laning phase and you're going to be able to apply your Q quite a lot in the laning phase, then I would look to try that out and run that on your Yasuo top lane. And for the tier 3 champions, these are just going to be the average picks. I wouldn't really recommend playing them right now. Like at best, they're good in certain situations. So for example, someone like Mundo, he's pretty good into something like Rumble. He's always been pretty good in that matchup, but I wouldn't really pick him into a lot of other things. There's just very easy ways to counter a pick like Mundo. And a lot of these picks here, there's just other champions in the tier 1 and in the tier 2 that basically just do their job better and easier than what they can do. So that is going to be all for this video. This should give you a pretty good idea of what you should be looking out for in Season 8 and what you should be looking to pick up or practice here before the new ranked season does start. If you guys did enjoy the video, then be sure to leave a like, subscribe if you've yet to already. So thanks for watching, have an awesome day, and I will see you in my next video.